Hi, my name's Eileen, and I used to think silence kept me safe. But the day my mom poured boiling water on me because I argued with my sister, and my dad laughed and said, "Trash deserves," something broke. Not just in my skin, in my place in the family. They said I was unstable. They filmed my pain. They used my scars to raise money, then gave it all to the daughter they actually loved. And the worst part? No one stopped them. What happens when your own family erases you on paper, and no one even notices? Do you stay quiet, or do you start writing everything down? Let me tell you what I did. People ask when the abuse started. I tell them, when she stopped pretending the kettle was for tea. That morning, I remember hearing it whistle, high, sharp, loud enough to cut through my bones. I was sitting on the edge of the couch, cradling my phone charger that Zinnia had yanked out of my room without asking. We'd argued over it, nothing out of the ordinary. She said I was being possessive. I said she was a thief. The words had barely settled in the air when she ran to our mother with crocodile tears and a trembling voice. "She screamed at me, Mom," she cried. "She shoved me." I didn't shove her. I didn't even raise my voice. But in our house, truth didn't matter. What mattered was who cried first, and louder. Mom stormed into the room with the kettle still in her hand. She didn't ask questions. She didn't yell. She just walked right toward me. I thought she was going to hand it off to Dad, or maybe she was still in the middle of pouring a cup for herself. My brain couldn't process the possibility fast enough. Before I could flinch, she tipped it sideways. The boiling water hit the side of my shoulder and neck first. I felt my skin blister before the pain even registered. It spread down my chest, a red-hot flood. I screamed, short, cut off, more shock than pain. Behind her, Dad stood in the hallway, arms crossed. He didn't move, didn't blink, and when the scream finally broke through the tension, he scoffed and said, "Trash deserves." That was it. No one rushed toward me. No wet towel, no 911 call. Mom set the kettle back down like it was just another Tuesday. I staggered back, hand clutching the fabric of my shirt, trying to keep it from pressing against the burn. The fabric was melting into my skin. My body shook, but I kept standing. Crying didn't help here. Screaming only got you called dramatic. Zinnia? She filmed me. From behind the kitchen island, she had her phone out, half hidden behind a cereal box. Later that night, I'd learned she posted it with a laughing emoji and the caption, "Over a charger, drama queen much?" I made it to the freezer myself, pulled out a half-empty bag of frozen peas and collapsed on the floor, pressing it against the wound. My vision blurred. I wanted to throw up. The peas weren't cold enough to numb it, but I didn't dare ask for ice. They'd say I was overreacting. Time passed. An hour, maybe 2. I lost track. No one checked on me. At some point, I heard Dad's voice in the next room. "We have to start being tougher with her. She's been getting away with too much." That evening, I tried to retreat upstairs, but Mom was waiting at the base of the staircase. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked. "To bed," I muttered, each word making the burn on my chest ache with fresh waves. "You owe your sister an apology," she said, arms crossed, voice flat. I looked at her, incredulous. "She took my charger. She lied." "Doesn't matter. You escalated. You raised your voice." She was scared. "She filmed me. You embarrassed this family." I stared, too stunned to respond. She tossed a notebook and pen on the kitchen table. "You can sleep after you apologize, and make it sincere." I sat down, one hand wrapped under my arm to keep the gauze in place. The other wrote, shakily, "Dear Zinnia, I'm sorry for yelling." When I handed it over, Zinnia glanced at it, then tore it in half without even reading. She smirked. "You're lucky Mom didn't pour it on your face." I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the torn pieces on the floor. I went upstairs eventually. The mirror caught me as I passed by the bathroom. I looked, mangled. Not just my skin, my posture, my eyes, and still, I didn't cry. Not because I didn't want to, but because crying was for people someone might come help. That night, I laid in bed, awake until the ceiling turned gray with morning. My shirt stuck to my shoulder. The air smelled like antiseptic and scorched cotton. I remembered being 9, standing by the stove, trying to fry eggs while Mom yelled at someone on the phone. I burned my palm on the pan. She told me to suck it up, said I shouldn't have been in her kitchen anyway. It wasn't the first time pain had been punished, but it was the first time I realized they weren't trying to change me, they were trying to erase me. The burn would eventually scar, but what stayed with me wasn't the heat. It was the laugh. I woke up the following week to a smell I couldn't name, part infection, part fabric, part something burnt that had settled into my skin. The wound on my shoulder wasn't healing right. It oozed when I moved too fast and stuck to whatever fabric touched it. The bandage I'd patched together with medical tape from Dad's drawer was no longer holding. I didn't tell anyone. That was the rule. But when the pain got sharp enough that I couldn't lift my arm above my chest, I knew I had to do something. I waited until just after sunrise, slipped on a hoodie 2 sizes too big, and caught the first bus headed downtown. The medical center near Sprague Avenue didn't open until 7, but I figured waiting outside was safer than asking my parents for help. When I got there, the waiting room smelled like lemon cleaner and stale coffee. The woman at the intake desk didn't even glance up when I approached. "Name?" she asked, tapping at her keyboard. "Eileen Murray." She typed. Stopped. Typed again. Her brow furrowed. "I'm not seeing you in the system." I adjusted my sleeve, trying to ignore the damp spot growing underneath it. "I'm on my parents' insurance, Vera and Calder Murray." More typing. A pause, then a skeptical glance. "We've got a Calder and a Vera, one dependent. Zinnia, no Eileen." I stood there, blinking. "You sure you're in the right hospital?" "I live with them," I said slowly. "I've lived there my whole life." She tilted her head. "Maybe something's lapsed. You'll need to call your provider, or pay out of pocket." I didn't have a credit card. I didn't even have a debit card anymore. My parents had shredded it 2 months ago after I bought a book online without permission. The intake nurse called for the next person, and I stepped aside, heart thudding. An hour later, Vera showed up. She walked in like she owned the place, hair pinned back, blouse ironed crisp. She smiled at the nurse, then pulled me aside with 2 fingers pressed to my elbow. "Are you out of your mind?" she hissed. "I didn't have a choice," I said, voice low. "It's infected." She looked me over, then leaned in with a practiced sigh. "She ran away last week," she told the nurse. "She's been emotionally unstable since the incident." The nurse's demeanor shifted. I wasn't a patient anymore. I was a liability. Vera walked me out without a single protest from the hospital staff. Not one person asked me if I wanted to stay. No one even looked me in the eye. Back in the car, she didn't speak until we were halfway home. "You really want to make this a scene?" "I just wanted antibiotics." "You wanted attention," she snapped. "You always want someone to feel sorry for you." When we pulled into the driveway, I reached for the handle, but she locked the doors. "If you keep pulling stunts like this, Eileen, I'm going to have no choice but to get you help." I stared straight ahead. The next day, she scheduled a therapy appointment. It wasn't for me. Not really. It was for the file. We walked into Dr. Whitmer's office 2 days later. He had a kind face, square glasses, and too many plaques on the wall. He greeted Vera warmly. He knew her. Of course he did. She'd brought Zinnia here before when she had social anxiety, which really just meant Zinnia didn't like being told no. Dr. Whitmer turned to me. "Hi, Eileen. I hear you've had a rough couple of weeks." I nodded. My arm itched under the bandage. Vera did most of the talking. She explained how I'd always been dramatic, how I had a pattern of manipulating situations for sympathy. She dabbed at her eyes when she spoke about the Boyle incident, calling it a cry for help. "She poured boiling water on me," I said, finally. Dr. Whitmer turned to me. "And you believe it was intentional?" "It was." Vera's face crumpled. "This is what we're dealing with," she said, voice shaking. "She truly believes we're out to hurt her." Zinnia, sitting in the corner, just nodded. "She's always been like this," she added. "Since we were kids. Everything's a conspiracy." I clenched my fists. "She filmed me." "I deleted that video," Zinnia said with mock sweetness. "I felt bad after." "I didn't do this to myself," I told Dr. Whitmer, my voice a whisper. I didn't pour anything on me. I didn't run away. I didn't lie. He wrote something down. Vera touched my arm lightly. Sweetheart, we all want what's best for you. After the session, Dr. Whitmer told Vera he'd review the case further. She thanked him like she'd just closed a sale. In the car, Vera didn't turn the radio on. She didn't yell. She didn't scold. She smiled. You see how easy it is to be erased? That night, I stood in the bathroom mirror, carefully pulling away the gauze on my shoulder. The wound was still red and raw, but it wasn't what scared me. What scared me was how easily my truth was bent out of shape. What scared me was the sound of my voice being ignored even when I spoke clearly. I wasn't just being silenced, I was being rewritten. That day I learned, being invisible wasn't the worst part. Being replaced was. The morning after the session with Dr. Whitmer, I walked into school feeling like someone had scraped the inside of my chest hollow. I didn't tell anyone what happened. There was no point. At home, I'd been gaslit. At the hospital, I'd been erased. Now, I was somewhere in between, functioning, but on autopilot. I went straight to my locker, kept my head down, and tried not to flinch every time the strap of my backpack brushed my shoulder. My sweatshirt covered most of the damage, but I could feel it pulsing underneath, like my skin still remembered. As I reached for my books, I overheard two girls from my class chatting across the hallway. They picked Zinnia for the Changemaker Award. Can you believe it? My stomach tightened. She totally deserves it, the other one said. Her campaign about bullying was so deep, like I cried reading it. No. I froze, my fingers barely touching the cold metal of my locker. I hadn't told anyone outside of home, but I'd been working for months on that campaign, interviewing other students quietly, writing anonymous letters of support, printing posters late at night when the rest of the house was asleep. I turned slowly. Further down the hall, a banner had gone up outside the main office, celebrating this year's changemaker, Zinnia Murray. Her face was everywhere, printed on flyers, on the school's website homepage, and beneath it, in large, bold letters, empathy starts with listening. My words. That was the line I'd written in the final draft of the project, a week before the award deadline. I'd tucked it in my backpack, intending to email it from the school library. But that draft never made it, because 2 days later, my backpack had been missing. Vera claimed the dog knocked it down the stairs. When I found it tucked behind the coat closet, the flash drive was gone, and now Zinnia had won. At the assembly that Friday, they dimmed the gym lights and set up the projector. Principal Harding made a speech about courage, compassion, and community, then called Zinnia to the stage. She walked up in a pale yellow dress, smiling like she'd cured cancer. The applause shook the bleachers. I sat near the back, hands clenched into fists beneath my thighs. Then she spoke. I've always believed in giving voice to those who feel invisible, she said into the microphone. And this project came from my heart, from seeing how cruel silence can be. Another line from my paper, verbatim. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't stand up or storm out, I just listened. When the lights came back on, Vera rushed up to the stage with her phone out, filming Zinnia's every move. Calder clapped from the side with that tired, distracted half smile he gave at every parent-teacher night, as if he were already thinking about lunch. I waited until the crowd thinned out, then met Zinnia in the hallway outside the locker rooms. She didn't look surprised to see me. That was mine, I said. She blinked innocently. What was? That speech, the campaign. You stole it. She shrugged. It was sitting in your bag for weeks. You weren't going to submit it. I was waiting for the right time. Well, she said, brushing her hair back, I made it better. People actually listened to me. Because you're a liar. She leaned in close, voice low and smooth. It's only lying if someone believes you didn't mean it. Vera appeared then, still clutching her phone. Aislinn, she warned, don't start drama. This is a good day. We're finally proud of her. They walked away together, two actors exiting stage left. That night, I didn't say a word over dinner. I pushed food around on my plate until it got cold. Neither of them noticed. They were too busy replaying Zinnia's speech on the TV, fast-forwarding to the parts where her eyes looked extra glassy. Around midnight, while the house slept, I packed a bag. Just a few things: some clothes, my ID, an old prepaid phone I'd hidden in the drawer, and $23 in loose cash. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening for footsteps. Nothing. No one came to stop me. No one asked where I was going. The front door creaked as it opened, and still, nothing. I walked to the edge of the neighborhood, took the shortcut behind the shopping center, and caught the last local bus heading north. Nadine met me outside her building with her jacket wrapped around her shoulders and a flashlight in hand. She didn't ask questions, just opened the side door and led me down to the basement. It was unfinished: concrete floors, a single cot by the wall, and a shelf full of old VHS tapes and dusty board games, but it was quiet. No kettles, no cameras, no staged therapy sessions. She handed me a blanket and a cup of water. "You're safe here," she said simply. I thanked her, set down my bag, and curled onto the mattress. It smelled faintly like lavender dryer sheets. My shoulder ached. My throat was dry. But I slept, and I didn't wake up in fear. For the first time in what felt like forever, no one was yelling, no one was filming, no one was rewriting my story. I didn't know where this path would take me, but it couldn't be worse than home. Mornings at Nadine's were quiet in the kind of way that made you notice things, like how the pipes clicked before hot water arrived, or how sunlight painted slow-moving rectangles on the floor through the small window near the ceiling. It was a different silence than the one at home. That one was heavy, suffocating. This one had air in it. After a few days of staying mostly in the basement, I started helping Nadine at the local community center where she volunteered part-time. It was a modest building near a laundromat and a diner, with faded bulletin boards, and a room that smelled like old paperbacks and church potluck leftovers. I helped her sort books for the reading shelf, organized the food pantry, and cleaned out a cabinet full of tangled extension cords. The work didn't pay, but it gave me something I hadn't had in a while: structure. A small sliver of usefulness, something no one could steal. One afternoon, while taping up boxes of donated winter coats, one of the other volunteers, Rosa, called me over to the front desk. "You need to see this," she said, already holding out her phone. I walked over slowly, wiping my hands on the back of my jeans. The screen showed a Facebook video, posted from an account with Vera's name in the header. She sat in her living room, hair curled, wearing a somber expression and holding a mug like it was a life raft. Her voice cracked perfectly, at every beat. "Our youngest daughter has been struggling with some very dark thoughts," she said, blinking slowly. "We're doing everything we can. She's harming herself, isolating, lashing out. We're scared. If you feel called to help, emotionally or financially, our family would be so grateful." The video panned briefly to a photo sitting on the table next to her, me, crying, with a sliver of my burn visible under the collar of my shirt. It had clearly been taken in secret. The caption read, "Prayers needed for Zinnia's little sister. We're setting up a support fund for her treatment and healing." Below it, the comments were already piling up. "Sending love to Zinnia's brave family. Your mom's an angel. Donating now. Some kids just lose their way, but love always wins." I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. Rosa placed her hand gently on my back. "Aislinn, I thought you should know." I nodded and muttered thanks, stepping into the hallway. The white noise machine near the therapy room buzzed behind me, soft but constant. I leaned against the wall and stared at the fire extinguisher. It felt like the floor might fall out from under me. Back at Nadine's, I showed her the video. She watched it quietly, then pulled out her laptop. "I can check if there's a fund actually set up in your name," she said. It took a few minutes, some Google sleuthing, and a search through tax records Nadine somehow knew how to access, but eventually we found it. Not only was there a GoFundMe linked to Vera's name, labeled Hope for Healing, but also a PayPal link and a donor circle through a local women's charity that had already raised over $4,000. But the kicker: it was all being transferred to an account under Zinnia's name. "That's not even the worst part," Nadine said, clicking into another tab. She found records from the state's Education and Health Assistance Department. It turns out Vera had applied for medical compensation for a minor trauma case, using my injury as evidence. There was even a photo uploaded with the file, the same one from the video. But look at the applicant name, Nadine said. Zinnia Murray, all of it. Every dollar, every sympathy comment, every grant, every prayer, all under my sister's name. I stared at the screen like it was a foreign language. My pain, I said slowly, paid for her yoga classes and lip scrubs. Nadine didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I want it all back, I said quietly. Everything they took. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the GoFundMe or the grants. It was about the story. They'd rewritten it. Again. Taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and rebranded it as their redemption arc, and people were buying it. My hands trembled, not from fear, not anymore, but from something deeper. The kind of betrayal that doesn't just cut you once, it reopens every wound that tried to scab over. I flashed back to when I was 8, standing at a lemonade stand on the corner of our street. I'd spent the whole weekend making signs and mixing powdery packets with tap water in cheap plastic pitchers. When I counted up $22 in quarters and singles, I'd handed it all over to Mom, beaming. It's for your shelter, I'd said proudly. She kissed the top of my head. You're such a generous soul. That shelter never existed. It wasn't until I was 14 and saw the receipts in the back seat of her car, mani-pedis, wine subscriptions, boutique candle shops, that I understood, and even then, I told myself maybe she needed it more. I don't think that way anymore. By evening, Nadine brought me her old laptop. The screen was cracked in one corner, but it worked. She didn't ask what I planned to do with it. Document everything, she said, quietly, thoroughly. I nodded, placed it on the folding table in the corner of the basement, and opened a blank folder. I named it Revision. I didn't plan on smiling that day. I'd opened the mailbox just to toss out junk flyers and a late water bill when I saw the envelope, thicker than usual, with the school's emblem stamped across the front. My name, Isleen Murray, not Zinnia, not to Guardian. Mine. Inside was a letter from the principal's office, short, formal. I'd been selected to receive the Perseverance Award, an annual recognition for students who demonstrated exceptional resilience and strength through personal adversity. It wasn't a scholarship, but it felt like someone had finally seen me. Not the burn, not the rumors, not the redacted files. Me. I folded the letter slowly, pressing my thumb over my name like I needed to feel it. Nadine smiled when I told her. She didn't gush, didn't clap, just gave me a nod and said, Told you, you don't vanish unless you let 'em. It was the first time in weeks I went to sleep thinking something might turn out okay. 3 days later, the phone rang at 9 a.m. Sharp. Nadine had already left for work, so I answered from the kitchen. Isleen Murray? A voice asked, clipped and official. Yes. This is Mrs. Thorpe from the principal's office. We wanted to clarify a detail about the upcoming senior assembly. Sure, I said, clutching the phone with both hands. We've been advised by your mother that it's not safe for you to attend. Given some recent concerns about your emotional state and potential disruptions, the committee has decided to present the award in your name to your sister, Zinnia. I didn't speak. She's agreed to accept it on your behalf. There will be a live stream available should you wish to watch. I hung up before I heard anything else. It was like watching your own birthday party on TV. I sat in Nadine's basement, knees pulled to my chest, and watched Zinnia walk on stage to accept the award I earned for surviving everything she helped cause. She read a speech. My speech. I'd written it in the back of my old journal, right after I got out of the hospital, when I still thought maybe I'd get to tell the truth someday. Resilience, she said into the mic, is not about never breaking. It's about choosing to rebuild when no one hands you the tools. Every word, mine. The delivery was perfect. She even copied the pauses I'd practiced, the slight tilt of the head I'd imagined in the mirror. I checked the comment feed below the video. So powerful. Zinnia's come so far. Her mom must be so proud. I closed the laptop slowly and sat back. My face felt numb. Not from crying. I wasn't crying. There was nothing left to cry. Later that night, I dug through my duffel bag and pulled out the old journal. It wasn't there. I checked under the mattress, in the side pocket, In the corner of the storage bin. Nothing. The next morning, I called Vera. "I need my journal," I said. She didn't miss a beat. "You left it open on the kitchen table." I thought it was a cry for help. "You read it?" I was concerned. "Did you give it to the school?" There was a pause, then the kind of soft sigh she reserved for when I overreacted. "Aislinn, the school needed context. You've always had dark thoughts. We just want you to get the support you need." I hung up. By lunchtime, the school counselor called. "We received anonymous documentation that raised some red flags," she said. "Your sister brought it to our attention because she's worried about you." The irony made me dizzy. She asked if I was considering hurting myself. "No," I said, "but apparently that doesn't matter." I created a burner account that night, a blank profile, no friends, no photos, just one post. She stole my pain and sold it for claps. It got 2 likes. One from a stranger. One from a ghost account I suspected was Nadine's way of saying, "I see you." I drafted an email to the awards committee. I told them the speech Zinnia read wasn't hers. That the story she shared belonged to me, that I could prove it. No reply. I sent another, this time with scanned pages from the journal, watermarked with the date, corner stained from a tear I remembered falling when I wrote the last paragraph. Still nothing. I wanted to scream, not for attention, just for confirmation that I hadn't disappeared entirely. Instead, I turned on the old laptop and added a new document to the revision folder. Witnesses stay silent. I whispered it aloud that night as I typed, "I'm not invisible anymore. I'm just archived." The day after I posted the quote to my burner account, just 10 words typed into a silent corner of the internet. I took Nadine's advice and applied for a small student loan. I didn't expect miracles, just wanted enough to enroll in a night class at the community college. Something simple. Online research. I figured if I couldn't tell my story in real life, maybe I could study the systems that let it be erased. But when I entered my social security number and date of birth into the financial aid portal, a red warning popped up. No match found for current dependent status. I tried again. Same result. I called the helpline. The man on the phone was polite but short. "We can't process your application," he said. "It looks like you're not registered under a legal guardian." "But I'm a minor, or I just turned 18 last month." "There's no active documentation linking you to any legal guardian," he repeated. "You'll need to contact the county records office." So I did. 2 days later, I sat in the waiting room of the Spokane County Clerk's office. The air inside was dry, the kind of place that smelled like ink cartridges and disappointment. When my number was called, I walked up to the counter and slid my ID across the glass. "I'm trying to understand why my dependent status disappeared," I told the clerk. "My parents are Vera and Calder Murray. I've lived with them my whole life." She typed slowly, her eyes narrowed at the screen. "There's no dependent listing for you under either parent," she said. "Last update was made 4 months ago. The file reflects only one child, Zinnia." My mouth went dry. "There's no record of me at all? You exist legally, but not under their household. If you need further clarification, I'd suggest filing a correction request through family court." She handed me a yellow form. It felt like being handed a pamphlet at your own funeral. I walked outside into a gray afternoon and sat on the curb. I wasn't just being ignored anymore. I had been erased, formally, legally, on paper. That night, Nadine and I sat in the basement eating soup out of mugs. She didn't ask too many questions, just let me tell her in pieces. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "They think if they change the paperwork, it rewrites the truth." "I guess it works," I murmured. "Everyone else seems to believe them." She didn't argue. Later that week, I got a message from a girl I hadn't talked to since 8th grade. She sent a link to a Dropbox folder and a single sentence. "Thought you should see this." The video was low-res, grainy. It showed me from a side angle, curled on the floor, clutching my arm, my breath sharp and stuttering. I remembered the moment. It was after the boiling water. I was still in shock. I hadn't even stood up yet, but the video's caption read, Manipulative episode. Staged injury breakdown. I stared at it for a long time before clicking play again. The clip was posted in a private therapist forum. Vera's name was on the uploader tag. Not only had she filmed me in that moment, she had uploaded it, framed it as performance, and used it to discredit me before I even knew it existed. The next morning, I didn't speak until nearly noon. Nadine found me in the corner of the basement, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, journal open, but untouched. "They didn't just abandon me," I said. "They're building a version of me that people hate on purpose." She didn't say anything, just handed me a cup of coffee and sat next to me on the floor. I didn't cry. I felt too empty for that. But my hands trembled with a fury that didn't know where to go. I'd been deleted from files, replaced in award ceremonies, and now broadcast as some broken, attention-hungry fraud. That's when I knew I had to start playing their game. Only better. I booted up the old laptop, opened a new document, and began compiling screenshots, tax records, statements from the GoFundMe page. I backed up everything 3 times, local, cloud, USB. I built a folder within Revision called Tactical. Every photo they posted of me, I matched it with the real date. I pulled receipts. I built timelines. I created a spreadsheet of everyone who donated, noting who thought their money was going to therapy versus who funded Zinnia's eyelash extensions. I wasn't just collecting proof. I was building a narrative, the kind that held up in court, or at least in the court of public opinion. After a few weeks, I gathered enough that I felt confident reaching out. The Advocacy Center's voicemail message was soft and clear. I left only my first name, said I had documentation, said I was no longer a minor, but had been removed from my legal records without notice. They called back within 48 hours. A woman named Janine answered. Her voice was firm but kind. "We'd like to see what you have," she said. "You don't need to come in. Just send what you're comfortable sharing. We'll review and advise." I sent the Dropbox link and waited. The email came a day later. "We believe you. Let's talk options." I exhaled so hard it made my ribs hurt. It was the first time in months, maybe years, that anyone on the outside said those words. The next morning, I opened my folder again. At the top of the file tree, I added a single line. Footnote, survivor. Not deleted, not dramatic, documented. If they wanted to erase me, I'd become the footnote they couldn't scrub out. By the time the email from Janine at the Advocacy Center landed in my inbox, something in me had already shifted. I wasn't waiting for validation anymore. I was collecting it, quietly, relentlessly. That morning, after Nadine left for her shift at the Logistics Center, I opened my tactical folder and got back to work. Every receipt, every photo, every time-stamped lie. I wasn't just trying to protect myself now, I was preparing to hold them accountable, not in some courtroom fantasy, but with undeniable, boring, bureaucratic truth. While scanning the downloaded PDFs from Mom's Hope for Healing Fund, Nadine noticed something odd. "Hey," she said, adjusting her glasses and turning her laptop screen toward me. "Look at the date on this transfer, April 3rd. I leaned in, a $6,800 payment from the fundraiser account, labeled under Personal Wellness Enhancement. "That's not therapy," I said flatly. Nadine pulled up Zinnia's social media. She scrolled to a post dated April 4th, a soft, filtered selfie of Zinnia, bandages on her nose, captioned, "New nose, new life. Healing is hot." My jaw clenched. She cut her face with money earned from my scars. I opened a Word document and began typing. I printed everything. Photos, bank statements, matching timestamps, posts, all color-coded, all cross-referenced. 2 days later, I walked into the Spokane Department of Family Services with a manila envelope so full it barely closed. I didn't use Nadine's address or mine. I listed a P.O. box we'd rented using her cousin's name. They didn't need to know where I slept. They just needed to know what had been done. The woman at the front desk, a 50-something named Mel with deep-set eyes and a lanyard full of faded stickers, took the envelope without flinching. "This won't go unanswered," she promised. Later that afternoon, Vera received her first notice of investigation. I knew because she posted about it, playing the role of the misunderstood mother persecuted for loving too hard. and almost immediately, the retaliation began. That Thursday, Nadine came home from work earlier than usual. Her hands were shaking, a folded envelope in her fist. "This came to the warehouse," she said, voice clipped. "It's addressed to me." I took it from her and read. It was a cease and desist letter. From Vera's lawyer. Allegations, harboring a minor without parental consent, encouraging delinquent behavior, interfering with family matters. "She's trying to scare you," I said. "She's trying to cost me my job," Nadine replied. "If this reaches corporate, they'll drop me." "I'll go," I offered. "Tonight." "No," she said, and her voice was firmer this time. "You're not the one hurting anyone. We'll fight this." That night, we ate frozen pizza in silence. Not angry silence. Battle planning silence. After dinner, I logged onto the burner account I'd created weeks earlier. Until now, I'd only used it to archive. But that night, I began to share. The first post was a screenshot of the medical receipt, $6,800 for wellness. I blurred out the last names, but left just enough intact. Caption: "Your facelift cost me more than skin." The second was an email I'd written to the school counselor, dated months prior, requesting a private meeting that was never answered. The third was a recording, short, just 7 seconds, of Zinnia laughing, whispering, "She should be grateful we even let her live here." I didn't tag anyone. I didn't name anyone. I let the truth float. The account was @RealDaughter. By the next morning, it had 600 followers. By noon, 2,000, then 10,000. The comments weren't all supportive at first. Some called me bitter. Others said I sounded jealous. But buried in between were voices that shook me. This happened to me too. I got erased in my family's story too. I believe you. I know that laugh. By the end of the week, local news stations had begun quietly following the account. An anonymous journalist messaged me with a simple request. "Talk to me. I'll verify everything." I didn't reply. Not yet. The Advocacy Center sent a follow-up message. "Documents under review. Please remain available." I went to sleep that night with a strange ache in my chest. Not dread, not fear, but something heavier. Like being full for the first time after starving yourself so long, you forget what that pressure means. They wanted the world to think I was unstable. Fine. Let them try to explain why the unstable one kept receipts. Let them spin the story when their threats had dates, signatures, hashtags, and bank logs. Let them scramble when every story they told the world came with a timestamp I could match. If the world needed a villain to love, I'd show them the monster they ignored. The first sign that the story had shifted came on a Monday morning. I was still half asleep, cradling a chipped mug of instant coffee in Nadine's kitchen. The space smelled like cinnamon and quiet, and I was trying not to think too hard, just staring out the window, watching a dog chase its own tail across the neighbor's lawn, when my phone buzzed. It was a DM on Instagram, from someone I didn't know. Probably one of the silent followers from @RealDaughter, the page that had grown legs in the dark, fed by quiet solidarity. The message was simple. "Thought you should see this." Attached was a link to a university's website. I clicked. The page loaded slowly, but when it appeared, I felt my stomach twist. There she was, Zinnia, centered beneath a banner that read, "Recipient Spotlight, Honoring Resilience." Same angles, same perfected smile, the kind that came from hours of watching influencers in front of ring lights. Beneath her portrait, in bold, elegant italics, "Survivors don't wait for rescue. We become our own heroes." My throat closed. The article outlined how Zinnia had earned a full scholarship from a national foundation dedicated to supporting youth who had overcome domestic trauma. She had given an interview, spoken at a private gala, and was listed as one of the year's Voices of Change. The accolades stretched across the screen like a fever dream, scripted, polished, deceitful. Then I saw the photo at the bottom. It was a close-up. A shoulder, partially turned, marked with a faint scar just under the strap of a sundress. My scar. The image had been cropped and filtered, but I knew it. I remembered the moment. I had been crying in Nadine's basement after another one of Mom's quiet punishments. Those emotional chokeholds dressed in phrases like, "You're imagining it," and Don't embarrass this family. I had curled up in the corner near the laundry machine, rocking, breath shallow. Zinnia must have taken that photo while I wasn't looking, or Vera had passed it along like a trophy. She's wearing my pain like a dress, I muttered aloud. Nadine emerged from the hallway, purse over her shoulder, keys jangling. What? I turned the phone toward her. She scanned the article, her expression hardening. Then she pulled out a chair and sat. It's time, she said quietly. That night, I pulled out the folder. It was thicker than I remembered. Emails, screenshots, voice memos, journal scans, therapy transcripts, court records, receipts, all of them dated, sorted, and waiting. I attached everything to an email and sent it to Tamara Lyle, the journalist who had quietly reached out months before. She'd never pushed, never baited me, just said, if you're ever ready, I want to hear it from you. Not them. I didn't write a lengthy intro, just, I'm ready. Here's everything. Tamara replied in under an hour. I believe you. I'll get this right. 2 days later, her article went live. Stolen pain. One sister's truth behind a family's charade. It didn't just spark attention, it exploded. By noon, Hatch Justice for Aislinn was trending nationally. The piece was thorough, relentless, honest. It included excerpts from the evidence I'd provided, voice notes where Vera coached Zinnia on what phrases to use for maximum emotional impact, screenshots from donors who had been misled, archived posts from the therapy support forum where Vera had uploaded my photo without consent. It also featured court records that confirmed what I'd long suspected. Funds earmarked for my recovery had never reached me. People weren't angry at me. They were furious for me. Zinnia locked her accounts the same day. Brands began making quiet exits. A beauty company released a vague statement about reevaluating influencer partnerships. The Scholarship Foundation responded swiftly. We are investigating these new claims and have suspended all promotional content related to the recipient. I stayed offline, didn't read the comments, didn't gloat, didn't reply to the new flood of messages that poured in. This wasn't vindication. It was exposure. The sound of a mirror cracking, not shattering. A few days after the article dropped, a local TV station reached out for an interview. I politely declined. Instead, Leona stepped forward. My grandmother. My father's mother. She hadn't spoken to me in almost a year, not since Grandpa's funeral, where she held her grief like a china plate, steady but fragile. After that, she disappeared into the quiet, always watching, always listening, but never reaching out. Until now. She called Tamara directly and offered documentation. Birth records, school notes, statements from teachers, medical forms, photos. One of them was me, age 9, standing beside a handmade sign, Lemonade for Shelter Moms. In her interview, she didn't raise her voice, she didn't weep. She simply said, my son watched, my daughter-in-law acted, but my granddaughter survived. They tried to erase her. I want her remembered. I watched the interview alone, cross-legged on the floor in Nadine's living room. A bowl of popcorn sat between us, mostly untouched. I didn't expect that, I whispered. Nadine nudged the bowl toward me. She's from the generation that waits until the facts are louder than feelings. But when they move, they don't stop. Then came the real blow, one I hadn't seen coming. The Attorney General's office released a statement. They were investigating misuse of nonprofit funds. The next morning, reporters gathered outside Vera's house. She stepped outside in a beige coat, carefully disheveled, flanked by an attorney. These are deeply personal matters, she began, voice thick with manufactured grief. We love both our daughters. We are cooperating fully. She was interrupted mid-sentence. A man in a dark suit approached her with a sealed envelope. He didn't speak, just handed it over and stepped aside. Vera's hands trembled. Her accounts were frozen. The investigation had begun. This time, no one leaned in for the tears. No one clapped. The cameras didn't cut away. They zoomed in. For once, she had no script. That evening, I walked through Riverfront Park alone. The air was cool, touched with early spring. Kids threw popcorn to geese by the pond. A man with a weathered saxophone played Summertime near the fountain, his case open for coins. No one stared at me. No one whispered. I sat on a bench near the river and pulled my coat tighter. For the first time, I felt clean. Not whole, not healed, but unchained. When I got home, I opened my notebook. On the cover, I'd written "Revision" in gold ink. I added a new entry. They stole my image, my words, my scars, but they never stole my voice. They tried to turn my truth into their fiction. Now the story is mine again. They had built a house of mirrors, every surface angled to reflect their curated perfection. But mirrors crack. Reflections warp. And truth doesn't need filters, it just needs light. In the weeks after everything fell apart, or maybe finally came together, the silence didn't roar. It didn't scream to be filled or thunder like an echo chamber. It hummed, soft, even, steady, like wind whispering through a cracked window or the rhythmic click of a ceiling fan pulling warm air through a quiet room. For the first time in years, silence wasn't threatening. It wasn't punishment. It belonged to me. I didn't get famous. There were no camera crews at my door, no invites to sit on velvet couches across from talk show hosts pretending to care. Just a few emails trickled in, some from strangers, some from former classmates, and a few from people I thought had long forgotten me. I believe you. Thank you for speaking. I'm sorry I didn't say something back then. That was more than enough. I hadn't fought to be seen by the world. I just wanted to stop being doubted by it. One slow Sunday morning, I packed the last of my things from Nadine's basement and loaded them into the trunk of my car. There was no big send-off, no final goodbye speech, just the quiet click of the trunk latching shut and the start of the ignition. I moved 2 counties over to a town called Ephrata. Not far enough to disappear, but far enough that I could walk past a bakery without remembering which corner I used to wait on. Far enough that my past couldn't tap me on the shoulder at the grocery store. I found a tiny 1-bedroom apartment above a flower shop. The rent was cheap, the windows drafty, and the landlady warned me that the radiator made noises like a ghost with stage fright. I told her I'd take it. She handed me a worn brass key without asking questions. That alone felt like a gift. I took a job at a youth outreach center nearby, tutoring, stocking snacks, showing up. It wasn't flashy. No one handed out gold stars. But I liked that the fridge was always stocked with string cheese and Capri Suns, and that no one ever asked why I walked a little slower on rainy days. One Tuesday afternoon, while organizing intake forms for new volunteers, I found an envelope in my mailbox at the center. No return address. Inside, a single typed letter, neatly formatted. Signed, Dr. Alan Whitmer. I was wrong, it read, and my silence nearly helped them win. He'd submitted a formal addendum to my medical file, public, notarized, and sent to every agency that had ever flagged me. In it, he admitted that I had been mischaracterized, that pressure and manipulation had shaped a false narrative, that he should have questioned the framing, and that he regretted not doing so sooner. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I read it once. Then again, then folded the page carefully and slipped it into a folder I'd labeled Truth. The legal consequences kept rolling in like slow thunder. Vera's nonprofit dissolved. The state froze her accounts pending investigation. She tried to brush it off, to spin the unraveling as a clerical mix-up, a technical error. But the public had stopped listening. Calder stepped down from his senior banking position with no explanation. His name vanished from the company's website overnight. Just a polite press release citing personal transitions. Not a single mention of what lay beneath. Zinnia didn't just lose endorsements. The scholarship foundation that once featured her as their golden girl issued a quiet retraction. No apology. Just silence. Her name disappeared from their site entirely, as though she'd never existed in their archives. A week later, she deactivated her social media. No farewell post. Just gone. None of my family reached out, except for Vera. One evening, a cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox, addressed in her signature script, still flawless, like nothing had ever cracked her facade. It wasn't an apology, not even an imitation of one. 3 pages of justification, rationalizations, phrases like, I did what I had to do, and you've always been so sensitive, filled the lines like poison dressed in lace. I love you, she wrote, but I had to protect the family. I read half a page, then walked calmly to the sink, turned on the faucet, and lit the letter with a match. Watched as the flame curled the corners, turned the lies to ash, and let the water carry it all away. Closure was never something she could offer. It was something I gave myself. A week later, while cleaning out a donation box I'd forgotten about in Nadine's garage, I found something I thought I'd lost forever. My old journal. The one I'd written in when I still believed keeping secrets made me strong. The cover was water-warped, some pages missing, others blurred with ink, but it was mine. I flipped to the first blank page. At the top, I wrote, Revision. Below it, they called me trash. I rebuilt from ashes. I wasn't trying to go viral. I wasn't writing a memoir. I was writing myself back into the world, in my own handwriting. Some mornings, when it rains, the scar on my shoulder still tightens. The skin pulls when I stretch too far. But I wear sleeveless now. Not for attention. Not to make a point. Just because I like the feel of the breeze. I walk to work with headphones in, listening to voices of people I'll never meet, but understand anyway. Podcasts. Interviews. Quiet monologues that echo my own experience in unexpected ways. I've learned something sacred in this space. Healing doesn't always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like boundaries. Like no longer answering calls that once dictated your life. Like distance that no longer needs justification. You don't have to forgive people who twisted you up just to untangle themselves. You just have to stop carrying the weight of their version of your story. This isn't the end of my story, but it is the end of theirs in mine. Because sometimes survival isn't loud. It's a quiet decision made alone on a rainy morning. It's a match over a sink. It's a letter signed with your own name, and that's enough.